I had served on the Galactic Coalition Council for 3 years, long enough to learn that humanity was tolerated more than respected. Our seat sat near the back of the Great Chamber aboard Orion Nexus, where ancient civilizations debated wars, trade, and borders that had existed for thousands of years. Most meetings passed without anyone asking for humanity's opinion. We were still the newest member of the coalition, young by every measure that mattered to them. That changed when the emergency alarm interrupted the session. A convoy carrying more than 7,000 settlers to the colony of New Horizon had vanished after broadcasting a desperate distress signal. The nearest coalition battle group was 4 days away. Around the chamber, delegates quietly accepted the inevitable. Reports were closed. Rescue plans disappeared before they had even begun. As I listened, I couldn't stay seated. I rose slowly. As long as that distress signal existed, I said, my voice breaking the silence, humanity does not consider this rescue mission over. For a heartbeat, the chamber was silent. Then the laughter began. The laughter echoed beneath the crystal dome, rolling through the chamber in waves. Some delegates shook their heads, while others exchanged amused glances. To them, I wasn't making a declaration. I was clinging to impossible hope. Humanity had been a coalition member for only 7 years. We possessed no massive armadas, no ancient gateways, no legendary admirals whose names carried political weight. We were simply too young to challenge reality. High Marshal Sarek regarded me with something that almost resembled sympathy. Representative Carter, he said, the nearest coalition fleet is 4 standard days away. The Vorak know this. They strike where we cannot answer. It is unfortunate, but this convoy is beyond saving. His words were calm, supported by centuries of military experience. Several delegates nodded in agreement. Councillor Alaris folded her silver hands. History teaches us that emotion cannot alter logistics. We mourn the settlers, but we must preserve the fleets we still possess. I looked around the chamber. No one appeared cruel. They had simply accepted loss as part of governing a galaxy too large to protect completely. Their civilizations had survived for thousands of years by making difficult decisions, and abandoning the convoy was merely another calculation. Yet something inside me refused to accept it. As long as someone called for help, I replied quietly, there remains a responsibility to answer. Another ripple of restrained laughter spread through the council. From where? One delegate asked. Human space lies far beyond this sector. Another leaned forward. Do you intend to rescue 7,000 civilians with diplomacy? A third simply smiled. Hope is admirable. Representative Carter, it is not a strategy. I didn't argue further. Instead, I reached beneath the council desk and activated my secure communicator. The transmission carried no speech, only a coded priority pulse directed toward Earth. If anyone could still hear that fading distress signal, I prayed they already had. Nearly 60 light-years away, hidden beneath the granite mountains of Earth, its northern continent, Fort Sentinel continued its routine without the slightest awareness of the debate unfolding inside Orion Nexus. The installation officially did not exist. Every record describing it had been erased before humanity had even joined the coalition. Those who worked there preferred it that way. I had visited only once. What I remembered most was the silence. No unnecessary conversations, no ceremonial speeches, only engineers, analysts, and officers moving with quiet purpose through endless steel corridors illuminated by cold white lights. Fort Sentinel was where humanity tested technologies too dangerous to unveil before they were fully understood. At the center of the complex rested the USS Guardian. She was unlike any warship ever presented to the coalition. From the outside, she appeared unfinished, her dark hull broken by rings surrounding an immense central chamber. Those rings housed the experimental void drive, a propulsion system designed to carve temporary corridors through the deep void rather than travel around it. Most scientists considered the project decades from operational service. Captain Daniel Brooks disagreed. He believed no technology was ever truly ready until real lives depended on it. The Guardian was preparing for another controlled trial beyond the edge of human territory. Engineers completed final inspections while technicians monitored thousands of diagnostic channels. Every component had been tested separately. None had been tested together under combat conditions. Brooks reviewed the final checklist in complete silence. Then every display on the bridge flickered. The signal was weak, almost invisible beneath cosmic background radiation. Not a military transmission, not a navigation beacon, a civilian distress call. Its origin lay hundreds of light years away. Most sensors would have dismissed it as noise. The experimental receivers integrated into the void drive did not. Brooks listened to the broken recording only once. Children crying, weapons fire, then silence. He slowly closed the report. Cancel the trial, he ordered. Every officer on the bridge looked up. Re-answering the call. No one questioned the order. That was one of the first things I had learned about Captain Daniel Brooks. He never raised his voice, never filled the bridge with dramatic speeches, and never demanded loyalty. He simply gave clear instructions, and every member of the Guardian trusted him enough to act without hesitation. The engineering crew immediately halted the scheduled trial sequence. Warning indicators spread across the status displays as technicians disconnected safety limits that had been required for testing. The void drive had never been activated at full output. Every simulation predicted a small chance of catastrophic failure. Every engineer in the room knew the risk. Brooks knew it too. He remained standing beside the tactical display, studying the faint distress signal that pulsed through layers of interference. The computer estimated less than a 2% probability that anyone aboard the convoy was still alive. 2% is enough, he said quietly. Commander Elena Ruiz looked up from her console. Sir, Fleet Command will want authorization before we deploy the prototype. I'll receive my report after we re-underway. The drive hasn't completed certification. I know. The transition corridor could collapse. I know. She met his eyes for only a second before nodding once. There was nothing more to say. Around the bridge, the crew worked with calm efficiency. Navigation recalculated impossible trajectories. Weapons officers powered defensive systems that had never been fired outside a testing range. Medical teams prepared emergency wards without knowing how many survivors they might find. Brooks finally pressed the ship-wide intercom. This is the captain. Our test mission has been canceled. We've intercepted a civilian distress signal beyond Coalition response range. We are attempting a direct void transit. The probability of engine failure remains significant. He paused. If we were the ones who heard the call, then we were the ones who answer it. No applause followed. No cheers. Only hundreds of professionals returning to their duties. Slowly, the massive rings surrounding the Guardian began to rotate. For the first time, the experimental void drive awakened at full power. The bridge lights dimmed as the rotating rings surrounding the Guardian accelerated beyond their normal operating limits. Deep beneath the armored decks, the experimental void drive consumed energy at a rate that made every engineer uneasy. Numbers climbed across the status displays faster than anyone had ever witnessed during controlled trials. Every safety warning remained active, yet no one suggested shutting the system down. Captain Brooks watched the countdown without changing his expression. Engineering, drive integrity holding at 94%. Navigation, corridor solution calculated. Margin of error, unacceptable. Brooks gave a slight nod. I'll use it. Commander Ruiz glanced toward him. Sir, if the corridor destabilizes, I'll be scattered across the deep void. If we don't, jump, Brooks answered. 7,000 civilians won. Do you have that chance? Silence followed. No one argued. The bridge crew had spent years testing theories that existed only on laboratory screens. Today, those equations would decide whether an entire convoy lived or died. Outside the ship, space itself began to distort. Stars stretched into thin lines before folding inward. Darkness gathered around the Guardian until even nearby patrol craft disappeared from view. Sensors reported impossible readings. Distance lost meaning as gravity bent around the forming corridor. Void aperture forming, the helmsman reported. Stability, 81%. Every engineer knew that anything below 90 was considered unsafe. Brooks remained calm. Take us in. The Guardian advanced. Instead of accelerating through space, the universe seemed to move around the ship. Reality twisted into an endless tunnel of black and silver fractures. Time became impossible to judge. Seconds felt like hours before collapsing into heartbeats. Every vibration echoed through the hall like distant thunder. Then the alarms vanished. Normal stars returned. Weapons fire illuminated the darkness ahead. Dozens of civilian transports drifted between burning escort ships while Vorak raiders surrounded them from every direction. None of the pirates fired. Every sensor aboard their vessels had detected the impossible. A warship had emerged directly from the void where no ship should have been able to exist. For one brief moment, the entire battlefield stood perfectly still. No one moved. The Vorak formation, moments earlier tightening around the crippled convoy, drifted in stunned silence as every sensor locked onto the impossible vessel that had appeared without warning. The Guardian floated between the refugees and the pirates, its dark hull reflecting the burning wreckage around it. No Coalition jump signature had been detected. No hyperspace corridor had opened. It had simply arrived, Captain Brooks broke the silence first. "Open a channel." The communications officer complied. "This is the human warship USS Guardian. All civilian transports maintain formation and proceed on heading 093. Do not stop. Do not return fire. We will cover your withdrawal." The convoy commander answered with a shaken voice. "We thought no one was coming." "You were heard," Brooks replied. "That is enough." The channel closed. On the tactical display, dozens of Vorak attack craft began repositioning. Their commander finally recovered from the shock. "They relocking weapons," Commander Ruiz reported. Brooks remained composed. "Deploy Raven drones." Hundreds of compact drones launched from concealed bays beneath the Guardian. They spread across the battlefield like a cloud of silent shadows, too small for the pirates to target effectively. Instead of attacking ships, they slipped through electronic defenses, disappearing into the Vorak command network. Seconds later, confusion erupted. Enemy targeting systems identified friendly vessels as hostile contacts. Formation data became corrupted. Fire control computers exchanged false coordinates. One pirate cruiser launched a full missile salvo into its own escort screen. Another answered with plasma batteries, believing it was under attack. The Vorak battle line collapsed into chaos. Only then did Brooks issue his next order. "Flagship, one shot." The Guardian, its main rail cannon fired. A single tungsten projectile crossed the battlefield at relativistic speed, pierced the pirate flagship from bow to stern, and exited through its reactor core. The enormous vessel folded apart in complete silence before exploding into a cloud of molten debris. Every remaining Vorak captain understood the message. The hunt was over. Now they were the ones trying to escape. The battlefield should have ended there. Instead, one crippled Vorak destroyer drifted behind the expanding debris field, its engines burning unevenly as emergency systems struggled to keep the vessel alive. Most of its weapons were gone, its shields had collapsed, and half its hull had been peeled open by friendly fire. Yet one communications array still functioned. "Escape vector detected," Commander Ruiz reported. Captain Brooks shook his head. "They were not escaping." A narrow transmission burst flashed across the tactical display before the electronic warfare team could suppress it. "Long-range distress beacon," the communications officer said. "Encoded military priority." Ruiz looked at the decoded data and felt her expression tighten. They called for reinforcement. Brooks studied the projection in silence. The signal had reached far beyond the pirate raiding force. Deep inside Vorak-controlled territory, a larger fleet would already be receiving coordinates. Based on known response times, they would arrive in less than 30 minutes. Estimated strength, Brooks asked, between 100 and 150 combat vessels. The bridge remained calm. No one suggested retreat. Ahead of them, the civilian convoy slowly accelerated away from the battlefield, damaged transports shielding one another as they disappeared toward Coalition space. Thousands of frightened settlers were finally moving beyond immediate danger. Brooks watched until the last transport cleared sensor range. "Convoy status?" "They reach friendly territory." "Good." He turned toward navigation. "Bring us about." Ruiz frowned slightly. "Sir, we staying." Every officer understood the meaning of those two words. The Guardian would face the incoming fleet alone. Not because victory was guaranteed, because someone had to ensure the refugees kept their lead. Brooks rested one hand on the command rail. "We came here to answer a distress call." He looked once toward the empty space where the convoy had vanished. They'd been rescued. His eyes returned to the growing cluster of red contacts appearing at the edge of long-range sensors. "Now we make sure they stay rescued." The first Vorak signatures appeared exactly 24 minutes later. Long-range sensors painted the darkness with expanding red markers until the tactical display resembled a spreading infection. 132 confirmed warships. Heavy cruisers, assault carriers, missile escorts. More contacts continued emerging from hyperspace behind the main formation. "They redeploying in combat order," Commander Ruiz reported. Captain Brooks studied the projection without visible concern. "They expecting another fleet." "They'll be disappointed." The bridge remained silent as navigation projected the surrounding region. Ahead drifted a chain of unstable gravitational fractures, natural scars left by ancient collisions between collapsed stars. Coalition charts marked the area as permanently impassable. Even the Vorak avoided it. Brooks pointed toward the anomalies. "Plot a course through the fractures." Several officers looked up. "The void drive was never designed for repeated activation," the chief engineer warned. "Inside that field, spatial distortion will multiply every instability." Brooks nodded once. "That is why they follow." The Guardian advanced at moderate speed, never attempting to outrun the approaching armada. From the Vorak perspective, the lone human warship appeared desperate, retreating toward certain destruction. Their formation accelerated, eager to trap its prey before it escaped. "They recommitted," Rui said. "Good." As the first gravitational fracture surrounded the Guardian, the void drive awakened again. Black rings rotated beneath the hull, bending reality just enough to slip between collapsing pockets of space. The pursuing Vorak copied the same course without understanding what the human ship was actually doing. Then Brooks gave the final command, "Collapse the corridor." The engineering officer pressed the authorization key. Behind the Guardian, the temporary void passage folded inward. Gravitational fractures merged into a violent chain reaction, swallowing half the pursuing fleet inside walls of distorted space. Ships vanished without explosions, erased into the darkness between realities. The surviving Vorak captains broke formation instantly. For the first time in their history, they fled from a single human warship. News of the battle reached Orion Nexus before the surviving Vorak ships crossed their own borders. At first, the reports were dismissed as corrupted sensor logs. Coalition analysts insisted no single vessel could defeat 2 pirate fleets, rescue thousands of civilians, and disappear into unstable gravitational fractures. Every calculation declared the same conclusion: impossible. I stood silently as the council replayed the recordings again and again. The first showed the Guardian appearing directly from the void. The second captured the Vorak fleet turning its weapons upon itself. The third ended with half of the pirate armada vanishing inside collapsing spatial fractures while the remaining ships fled without attempting another attack. No one laughed now. High Marshal Sarek watched the tactical replay until the final image faded into darkness. "How many ships did humanity commit?" he finally asked. I answered honestly, 1. Several delegates stared at me, convinced they had misunderstood. 1 task force. Another asked, 1 battleship? 1 ship, I repeated. Silence settled over the chamber. Counselor Alaris slowly folded her hands. "You concealed this technology." "No," I replied. "You never asked." That answer seemed to trouble them even more. Their concern was no longer focused on the experimental drive or the precision weapons. Those could eventually be understood. What unsettled them was the decision that had sent the Guardian into battle. No formal vote, no committee, no strategic conference. A distress call had been heard. A captain had answered. To many civilizations, such independence appeared reckless. To humanity, it was expected. I looked across the chamber at representatives who had ruled the stars for thousands of years. "For us," I said quietly, "the mission ended the moment the civilians were safe. Everything after that was simply the cost of making sure they remained safe." No one challenged those words. For the first time since humanity had joined the coalition, every delegate looked toward Earth's seat not with amusement, but with respect. The journey back to coalition space was uneventful. The USS Guardian emerged from the void without ceremony, carrying fresh scars across its armored hull. Entire sections of external plating had been burned away. Several drone bays were empty, and the experimental drive required immediate shutdown to prevent catastrophic failure. Yet the ship remained operational. The crew returned to routine reports as though they had completed nothing more remarkable than a standard escort mission. I was waiting when they arrived. The docking bay fell silent as Captain Daniel Brooks stepped onto Orion Nexus. There was no parade, no honor guard, and no triumphant speech. He simply handed me a sealed operations log. "Mission complete." Before I could answer, Coalition security requested custody of every recording from the battle. The council convened within hours. For the first time since humanity joined the coalition, the chamber was filled not with curiosity but with caution. Every delegate had reviewed the recovered sensor archives. Every simulation reached the same conclusion. If the Guardian had chosen to destroy the arriving Vorak fleet instead of delaying it, the result would likely have been identical. High Marshal Sarek finally broke the silence. "Captain Brooks, why did you withdraw?" Brooks answered without hesitation. "Because the objective was never the fleet." The Marshal frowned. "The objective was victory." "No." Brooks met the gaze of every representative in the chamber. "The objective was civilians." Another delegate leaned forward. "You had the capability to continue the engagement. We had the capability to finish the rescue." The distinction echoed through the hall. For centuries, coalition doctrine measured success by enemy losses, territorial gains, and strategic dominance. Humanity measured success differently. If every civilian survived, the mission was complete. Everything beyond that represented unnecessary risk. The realization unsettled the council more than any weapon demonstrated during the battle. Humanity had not revealed a civilization obsessed with conquest. It had revealed one prepared to wage overwhelming war, only to ensure it would never be necessary again. When the meeting ended, the Council ordered the entire engagement sealed under the highest security classification. Not because humanity had failed, because the galaxy was no longer certain it understood the species it had once dismissed. Weeks passed before the Council finally released a carefully edited report describing the convoy rescue. Most tactical details remained classified, while references to the void drive and the battle inside the gravitational fractures were removed entirely. Officially, humanity had simply provided timely assistance during an unexpected pirate attack. No one believed the report. Across Coalition space, fragments of sensor recordings spread through military academies, merchant fleets, and civilian communication networks. Analysts slowed the footage frame by frame, searching for hidden escorts that never appeared. Engineers attempted to explain the Guardian's arrival through impossible equations. Historians compared the battle with every recorded engagement of the last 5,000 years. None found an answer. I spent those weeks attending meetings that asked the wrong questions. How powerful were human weapons? How many ships like the Guardian existed? Could the void drive be reproduced? No delegate asked why Captain Brooks had entered the battle in the first place. Eventually, I answered the question they had overlooked. You assume our strength is the ship. The chamber fell quiet. It isn't. Counselor Alaris frowned. Then what is our promise? Several delegates exchanged uncertain glances. When a distress signal reaches humanity, I continued. Someone answers it. Distance is irrelevant. Politics are irrelevant. Probability is irrelevant. High Marshal Sarek studied me carefully. Even when success is unlikely? Especially then. The silence that followed felt heavier than any debate. For civilizations that measured every action through strategic advantage, the idea seemed irrational. Entire fleets were never risked for strangers. Rescue operations were abandoned once survival became mathematically impossible. Humanity accepted different mathematics. If there was even one chance left, someone would go. Months later, merchants crossing the frontier reported an unexpected change. Pirate vessels that once hunted isolated convoys now broke formation whenever unidentified human transponders appeared on long-range scanners. Not because they knew what ship was approaching, because they no longer wished to discover the answer. Fear had traveled farther than the Guardian ever had, and for the first time in generations, the outer trade routes grew quiet. A year passed before humanity spoke publicly about the rescue. There were no celebrations, no victory parades, no demands for recognition before the Coalition Council. Earth released only a brief statement confirming that the USS Guardian had responded to a civilian distress signal under existing humanitarian protocols. The document ended with a single sentence. Future responses will be faster. Few understood what it meant. 3 months later, freight captains began reporting unfamiliar human warships stationed along the busiest trade corridors. They carried no diplomatic delegations, demanded no port privileges, and rarely transmitted beyond standard identification codes. Their patrol routes appeared random until Coalition analysts overlaid every position with historical emergency beacon data. The pattern became obvious. Humanity had built an entirely new fleet around rescue response times. The official announcement followed soon afterward. Void Response Fleet. Its purpose was unlike any military organization in recorded galactic history. Every vessel carried heavy armament, advanced medical facilities, engineering teams, evacuation craft, autonomous repair drones, and experimental void drives. Combat was considered a secondary function. The fleet existed for one reason alone: reach anyone before everyone else declared them lost. The Council questioned the expense. Maintaining such readiness cannot be practical, High Marshal Sarek observed during a classified session. I answered calmly, it isn't. Then why continue? Because one unanswered distress call is already too many. No delegate challenged the statement. Construction accelerated across the Sol system. Shipyards that had quietly expanded for decades revealed reserve docks hidden beneath orbital platforms. New vessels entered service with remarkable speed, each following the same philosophy as the Guardian. They were not designed to conquer territory. They were designed to arrive. Across Coalition space, emergency beacon manufacturers introduced a surprising update. Every certified distress transmitter now included a dedicated human emergency frequency alongside traditional Coalition channels. No law required the modification. No government requested it. Manufacturers simply noticed what frightened civilians had already concluded. If every other signal failed, there was one civilization that still came. And somewhere beyond the mapped stars, Another captain waited beside another silent console, prepared to answer without hesitation when the next impossible call finally arrived. 5 years have passed since the convoy rescue. The battle is still officially classified. Only a handful of coalition officials know what truly happened inside the gravitational fractures or how a single human warship scattered an entire Vorak armada. Yet secrecy proved powerless against reputation. Stories spread faster than documents ever could. Every merchant captain had heard them. Every pirate had embellished them. Every frontier colony repeated them as fact. The details changed. The conclusion never did. If humans answered the beacon, someone would survive. I rarely attended council sessions anymore. Humanity no longer needed to defend its place among the stars. The laughter that had greeted our first rescue proposal had disappeared forever, replaced by respectful silence whenever Earth's delegation requested the floor. The greatest change, however, had occurred beyond politics. Emergency transmitters across coalition space no longer activated a single distress frequency. By common practice, every beacon now opened with one transmission directed toward the nearest coalition authority. The second signal always went to humanity. Not because regulations demanded it. Because experience did. Trade routes once abandoned as impossible to protect became active again. Frontier settlements expanded farther into unexplored sectors. Civilian captains accepted dangerous voyages knowing that somewhere, beyond ordinary charts, a human response fleet remained on constant standby. Piracy declined to its lowest level and recorded history. Captured Vorak commanders revealed the reason without hesitation. They no longer feared coalition patrols. They feared arriving first and finding a human ship already waiting. Sometimes the responding vessel never fired a shot. Sometimes its mere appearance ended the attack before it began. No pirate captain wished to gamble on discovering which outcome awaited them. Looking back, I often remembered the laughter that filled this chamber after I promised humanity would continue searching for the missing convoy. None of those delegates had intended cruelty. They simply believed rescue had become impossible. Humanity never accepted that conclusion. As long as a signal existed, someone would answer. And in a galaxy that had grown accustomed to giving up, that simple promise became more powerful than any weapon humanity had ever built. The final council session was brief. No debates remained. No one questioned humanity's place among the stars. I stood beside Ambassador Ryan Cole as the chamber reviewed another rescue completed by the Void Response Fleet. No enemy had been destroyed. No territory had changed hands. Thousands simply lived because someone had answered. When the meeting ended, the High Marshal quietly asked Ryan what made humanity different from every civilization that had ruled before it. Ryan looked across the chamber one final time. "Strength is not measured by the wars you win," he said quietly. "It is measured by the people still alive because you came." No one answered. The council adjourned. For the first time in recorded history, the galaxy no longer measured safety by the size of its fleets. It measured it by one simple question. If everything goes wrong, will humanity hear the call? History would record that, more often than not, they already had.